Hello, world. Welcome to Business and Travel. My name is Shanae, and I am here with Lindsay from We Travel and Brian from the Group Travel Leader. Today, we're going to be talking about the business of group travel. Brian and Lindsay, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, my name is Brian Jewell, and I am the executive editor at the Group Travel Leader, family of travel magazines and websites. We publish travel content specifically for the group travel space. So we don't write about family travel. We don't write about couples vacations. We're all about group travel, which means that over about 3 decades, we have learned the ins and outs of what makes group travel tick, what makes it awesome, how to do it successfully. And I'm excited to share some of that insight with you all today.
And I'll take over from Brian. My name is Lindsay and Achudi, and I manage accounts for We Travel in the US market. Basically, We Travel is a payment and a booking platform. So we process payment for multi-day group tours. And I'm happy to be here and share any questions you may have about how payment processing works. And looking forward to having this conversation.
Thank you both so much for being here. Today's workflow is going to start with Brian sharing with us the process of creating a group trip from start to finish. And then Lindsay's going to come in and talk about the payment processing aspect of everything. I know when it comes to group trips, it's a very ambitious goal to want to create a group trip, and they're honestly really fun to do. But one of the things is we have to manage our idea with some technical aspects as well. So today we're going to combine both with both of our leaders here, and I'm excited to get started. So Brian, I'll let you take it away from here. Let me know if you need to share your screen.
Yeah, I would love to share if you can authorize that. Let's see, I might be able to.
Okay, yeah. 1 second. Okay, you're all set.
All right. Oh, I think you need to turn off your, yeah, there we go. All right. Everybody see this slide? Okay.
Yes.
So I want to walk you guys through the basics of group travel, give you some ideas about how it can work for your organization, and a very, very high-level overview of the different ways you can go about doing it. Now, I'll say up front, you can go as shallow in group travel or as deep in group travel as you want, depending on how much you like the process of planning trips. We don't have nearly enough time for me to give you all the detailed information today, but we do have a resource that's 100% free. It's a free download on our website. And at the end here, I'm going to give you a link and a QR code to that. And that will answer all those nuts and bolts questions that we just don't have time to get to today. So group travel is a world of opportunity, but let's talk about why you might want to do it. If you are, let's say, an influencer or someone else who maybe has a group of friends or a big family, a social group, a club that you think might be interested in traveling with you, why would you want to go to the effort to plan a group trip, to lead a group trip, and to do everything that's involved there? Reason number one is you get to take free trips with your friends. And that word free is really key there. That's something that you don't always hear people talking about in group travel. But if you plan it right, and I'm going to tell you how to plan it right today, you as the organizer should get to take the trip free. And for many, many, many of our readers of our magazines, websites, newsletters, that's why they got in the business, was to take free trips with friends. So we're going to talk more about how that works in a minute. Another reason you might want to do it is to build follower loyalty. This is especially impactful for influencers, for people who maybe have a podcast, a TikTok account, anything where they have a growing follower base, a blog, a Substack, anything like that. If you want to build some loyalty among your followers, inviting them to come on a trip with you is a great way to do it, because it bridges that gap between the virtual world where you operate as a content creator or an influencer into the real world. So people who have followed you from a distance get to meet you, they get to spend some time with you. And if they do that, they're probably going to love you. And they may tell their friends about you. They may want to bring some of their friends on their next trip with you. So it's a great way to build loyalty and to increase the size of your audience. And we know it as that audience becomes more loyal and trust you more, they're not only going to travel with you, follow your content, they're more likely to click through, they're more likely to buy from brands you recommend and boost the value you bring as an influencer. Another great reason that I just kind of mentioned that there is audience growth. And so if you decide you're going to do a group trip with your tribe and you open it up to people who are not already followers, you may find that one person who follows all your content decides to come on the trip, but she wants to bring her sister. She wants to bring her college roommate. She wants to bring her mom. And those people, not only do they help the trip be more fun, but they're probably going to start following your content too. So it's a great way to grow your audience in a really organic and authentic way instead of just picking up a bunch of randos who follow you online and you don't know why. And finally, there is revenue potential in group travel. Now, this depends a whole lot on how you do it. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that on your first group trip, you're going to make a $10,000 profit. It's possible, but it doesn't always happen that way for everyone. So we're going to talk a little bit about what kind of revenue potential there is and the different ways to get at it. But first of all, I want to kind of introduce you to 4 main approaches to group travel. And these sort of start with the easiest approach, which might be great for your first time out. The easiest approach is also probably the least profitable approach. And then we're going to kind of stair step into approaches that gradually involve more and more work for you. As the level of work increases, so does the profit potential. So we're going to start on the low end of the scale and work our way up. First approach to group travel would be to work with a travel advisor. You may know these people as travel agents. These days, they like to be called travel advisors. It's the same thing. Now, there's a huge benefit to working with a travel advisor, which is this travel pro does the planning and you promote the trip. And so if you're a content creator and influencer, if what you're really good at is generating buzz, marketing, that sort of thing, promoting the trip is already in your wheelhouse. That's not a problem for you. What you don't necessarily already have the existing skills to do is to plan a great trip. So this arrangement can be really beneficial because each person does what they're great at. The travel pro plans the trip, you promote the trip, and neither of you has to mess with the part that you're not as good at. This works really well if you are interested in putting together a group trip to a resort, taking a group on a cruise, or some other kind of single destination trip. So if you say, hey, we're going to go to Paris and we're going to do 5 nights in Paris, we're staying at the same hotel the whole time. We may have some planned activities, but it's a lot of free time. A travel advisor is going to be ideal for helping you with that because they can help you with the air travel arrangements. They can probably get you in a good hotel, recommend the right hotel for you, take care of all those bookings. Same with the resort, same with the cruise. Cruises can be a little bit complicated because there's so many different tiers of cabins that you can book. Your travel advisor is going to know what line to put you on, what tier of cabins you want, help you figure out the pricing. And so for a trip like that, a travel advisor can be your best friend. The downside of working with a travel advisor is there's very, very little revenue potential for you. Now, that might not be a big deal if your primary aim is just to have fun and travel free. But travel advisors work on a commission model. And so if you plan your group trip with them, they are going to handle all the payment processing. Usually they're going to take care of all the logistics. They're going to get paid a commission from the hotel, from the cruise line, from the resort for booking that trip. If you bring them enough people, they may be willing to share some of that commission with you, but not all of them do this. So you may find yourself basically just kind of breaking even on the trip or getting the trip free, and the travel advisor is the one making most of the money. That's not a bad thing. It's not that they are taking advantage of you. That's just the business model. That's the easiest way to go. It's also the lowest revenue potential. The next approach would be to work with a retail tour operator. Now, when I say retail, I mean a tour operator that has set departures for their tours. So let's say, it's All About Europe. I made that company up. And All About Europe runs a departure, a tour of France once a month. And it always starts on the first Saturday of the month. They sell the seats on that tour through retail channels. So on their website, maybe through independent third-party websites, or also through through travel agents. Again, you get the benefit of travel pros doing all the planning and you're just promoting the trip. So you say, hey, I'm going to try to get whatever, 10, 15, 20 people to go on this first Saturday departure with All About Europe to go to France for a week. And all you have to do is get a link from the company, and they're going to take care of the payments and the logistics, and you just bring your people, have them all go and sign up on that link, and it works really well. They have lots of expertise in group experiences. So if you're wanting your group to do something more involved than just showing up, going to restaurants, if you want them to have a dinner in a castle in Paris, let's say, if you want a behind the scenes tour at the Louvre, if you want to spend a couple nights in Paris, but then get on a riverboat and go down the Seine for a couple days and then visit wine country, if it's a complicated itinerary with a lot of movement, tour operators know exactly how to do this because they've already built the product. So they're really, really good if you want to do something that's more than just staying in one place. The downside is that you're going to have very little flexibility or exclusivity with a retail tour operator, because remember, they do that departure the first Saturday of every month or whenever they do it. That means it's going to be the same itinerary. They're not going to make changes for you. And also, they want to sell out that departure. They've got a motor coach of 40 or 50 seats. They want to sell as many of those seats as possible. So if you bring them 20 people, that's great. They're going to try to sell those other 20 seats to other people that you don't know. That's not necessarily a terrible thing, but if you want to have an exclusive experience for your group, this may not be the direction for you to go. Retail tour operators almost always have a policy. It's called a comp policy, comp being complimentary, which means how many people do they need you to bring them, paying customers, in order to give you your trip free. This can range. I've seen a policy that's as low as 6 paid for one comp, all the way up to like 15 paid for a comp. So when you talk to these retail tour companies, you want to find out how many people it takes to get your trip free. And then if it's, say 10 to 1 and you bring them 20 people, then you're in a position where you get your trip free, and also there's excess. So you might be able to convert that second comp into cash, which is how you start seeing some profit in this way. Now, a similar approach that's just a little more complicated is partnering with what I call a private labeler. This is still a tour company. They're still destination experts. They package trips. They can move you around really easily. The difference is they're not selling it under their own brand. It's not retail sales. Instead, they are going to put the trip together, but let you put your brand on it as a private label, much like, the Trader Joe's brand snack cakes. Trader Joe's didn't make them. They bought them from another vendor and then put their own label on it. And you're doing the same thing. So the tour company, or sometimes you hear a DMC, destination management company, it's very similar. They do all the logistical work. They're booking the hotels, getting the restaurants put together, providing the motor coach or whatever transportation you have. They're doing all the work behind the scenes, but then you are packaging it as your branded experience. The great thing is they can completely customize and privatize this trip for you. So they may have an off-the-rack suggestion for that France trip, but then you can come in and say, you know what, our group's not into wine, we're more into art. So let's take off the wine region and spend 2 days at the Louvre instead of, going wine tasting. And there's no problem. They're happy to do that for you. And they also build these trips privately for you. So you don't have to worry about anybody else coming into that trip. It's going to be just you and your group. The good news is that because it's your branded trip, you can set the price wherever you want it. The bad news is that this private labeler is probably going to have some minimums. And so if you don't meet those minimums in the number of people you bring in, you may be on the hook to hit the price point they need for the entire trip to work. So that might mean you have to raise your price a little bit. It might mean you might have to come out of pocket a little bit if you don't get enough people to come on, just to make sure the tour company meets its price, because they're going to have a bottom line price for you. The good news, though, is since you're setting the price, there is a good amount of profit potential. If you feel strongly that you can get those 20 people to come with you, figure out where you need to set the price so that you have some profit in addition to your free trip and to meeting the minimums that the tour company requires. So that's the third approach. The fourth approach is the most convoluted, but also has the biggest profit potential, and that is build and run the trip yourself. Now, this means that you plan and execute every element of the trip. You have to find the hotel. You have to charter whatever transportation you're using. You've got to figure out flights if you're flying. You got to figure out how you're getting people there. You've got to put the itinerary together. You've got to figure out where we're going on what day and what we're doing and buying tickets and all that. I'm not going to lie to you. There's a lot of work involved here. The good news is you're not completely alone because you can rely on partnerships with travel suppliers and destination marketers. So you could call the French Tourism Board or say, Visit Paris or something like that and say, hey, I want to bring a group next year. Can you help me build an itinerary? Can you help me figure out the hotels that I should be talking to? They're going to do that for you and they're going to do it free. So that's super, super helpful. So you're not, just Googling and phone calling everybody. You're working with some strategic partners and suppliers. That's people like hotel brands. And they're going to help you get where you need to be. So you're not completely doing it on your own. The good news is that there is high profit potential here because you pick the price of every single supplier you're working with. You decide how much do you want to spend on the hotel, on the motor coach, on the restaurants. And also because you're setting the price, none of your travelers knows how much you're spending on the hotel, how much you're spending on the motor coach. So you can build in as much profit margin as you want, as long as you're not getting to the point where your travelers are looking at the total price saying, this doesn't make sense. So of course you have to keep market conditions in mind. The downside is there is higher risk because that hotel company, they're going to want to be paid for the amount of rooms you contracted, whether you sell all the rooms or not. The motor coach company is going to want to be paid. The restaurant might have minimums. And so if you don't sell enough to meet those minimums, you're going to have to write a check at the end of the trip. That's not what we want. And so you need to feel really confident in your ability to bring the right number of travelers on a trip before you go the build it and run it yourself route. But there are people who, once they try this, they're absolutely hooked on it because traveling and planning travel can be a real thrill. And so if you're that kind of person that geeks out about making travel arrangements, this could be a really good way for you to go. It's going to be time consuming, but you can enjoy yourself and maybe make a lot of cash on it. So I'm going to wrap up with just a few common questions. First, how much money will this cost me? Well, if you're working at the low end of the spectrum, it's not going to cost you anything except the time of talking to the travel agent or the tour operator and then promoting it to your group. As you get up to the top end of the spectrum, you can plan on things like a motor coach costing $1,200 to $1,500 per day to charter. So if you think you need to take a bus, keep that in mind. Hotel rates in the US right now, average daily rate is $150 a night plus. Now you can get that rate down a little bit if you're bringing in groups, but still, you might be on the hook if you book, a 20-room block and then only sell 18 of those rooms. You can count on about $300 a night that you're going to have to come out of pocket if your attendance doesn't show up right. So it may not cost you anything. If you work with that travel agent or the tour company, you're not on the hook. But as you take on more responsibility yourself, you may have to have some buffer in your budget to account for attrition or emergencies, people canceling, that sort of thing. Next question, how much money can I make? Again, this really depends on how much risk you want to take. I have seen tour companies say, man, we only make $75 per person on our trips because we're trying to keep the price so low. I don't think that's worth it personally, unless you're doing a volume business, which those tour companies are doing. For you, I think you probably need to be talking about $500 to $1,000 per person margin on your trips to make it worth the time you're putting into it. So that's all about, figuring out the price point of your suppliers and your vendors, and then figuring out how much your travelers are going to be willing to pay, and making sure that the value you're providing in personality, in fun, in exclusivity, makes it worthwhile for them to pay that marginal cost, that extra $500 to $1,000. They're willing to pay that to do it with you because you bring such an attractive brand. But if you're making $1,000 per person profit and you operate a trip with 20 people, that's 20 grand. That's pretty cool. If you get that up to 40 or 50 people, we're talking about real money. Is that going to happen on your first trip? No. But if you really get into a groove and build an audience, it can absolutely happen, let's say, within a few years. How much liability do I have? Well, again, if you are just working with a travel agent or a retail tour operator, you have virtually no liability. And I should stop here and say I am not an attorney. So check this out with your attorney, but don't just take my word for it. My understanding is you don't have much liability if you're just saying to friends, hey, I found a travel agent or a tour operator. Let's all go buy their package together. Once you put your brand on it, or once you build the trip yourself, you do have some liability. And so if you're going to go that route, you need to think about getting some liability insurance that would cover you as a company if you don't already have that. Hit me afterward. I can give you some recommendations of some good companies that work in the travel space that have errors and omissions and liability insurance to help you so that if somebody falls and breaks their leg on the trip, if there's a problem with the trip, if a hotel bumps you or something like that, your travelers aren't coming after you to take all your money because you have insurance that's going to cover that. So something to think about as you get deeper into group travel. Finally, how much time does it take? I would recommend you think 18 months in advance. Now, you don't necessarily have to plan 18 months in advance, but if you're going to be really strategic about figuring out where your people want to go, testing your audience, doing surveys, figuring out the market, that gives you plenty of time to do that really well and not feel rushed. I would start making contact with vendors 12 months in advance. Whether that's an independent tour company you're working with, a travel agent, or the hotels, restaurants, people that you want to use if you're going to do it yourself. Can you do it 6 months in advance? Yeah, but it's going to be kind of stressful. 12 months in advance gives you plenty of time to market the trip. And you might also have some time if you're trying to sell the trip and it's just not going anywhere. If you start 12 months in advance, your vendors may give you a grace period where you can cancel it without having a penalty. So that's really important. If you're booking something 6 months in advance, they're not going to give you that grace period because they're going to sell that seat to somebody else if they don't sell it to you. So you can spend, 10 hours putting a trip together if you work with a pro, and that's great. You can spend 100 hours putting a trip together if you do it yourself. That's also great. It's all about how involved you want to be, how much risk you want to take, how much return you're looking for. Now, many, many more questions will be answered in this free resource, Travel Free and Bring Your Friends. It's like a 30-page PDF that we put together. It's all it takes for you to get it is to scan the code or go to the website, grouptravelleader.com/travelfree. You're going to give us your first name, last name, email address, and we will send you that instantly. And it's going to have all that information about working with tourism boards, chartering motor coaches, finding hotel leads, all the details that we're not going to get into today. They're all there. Doesn't cost you a penny. And if you are interested in learning more about the group tour market, you can certainly read our magazines at grouptravelleader.com. We've got a great podcast, Gather and Go. Scan that QR code or search for it wherever you look for podcasts. You get tons and tons of information. And can't wait to hear what your questions are. Can't wait to hear what Lindsay has to say about integrating all her awesome tech tools into this fun industry. So that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. You touched on some great topics, some great points. I know me personally, I used to plan retreats when I lived in Morocco. And so a lot of what you talked about was like, okay, I remember doing that. And I always recommend people that are running it themselves to connect with the hotel, because most likely they already have trips that they've planned so many times and tour operators and vendors that they can connect with. So it helps the person planning and helps them create their personalized trip by just working with the hotel that they're going to stay at. Lindsay, you want to go ahead? Do you want to share your screen or?
I'd love to. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
So it's showing my entire computer, but it's okay. There we go. Give me a moment. There we go. Can you see what I have here now? Perfect.
Yes, we can see it.
All right. Again, my name is Lindsay, and I work in the account management team at WeTravel. And so I have way more slides, but I'll go through them much faster than it looks. So don't worry, Shanae. Okay, so here we are. So about WeTravel. So WeTravel is a payment and booking platform. And so we are designed for travel companies that offer multi-day and group tours. And so we have integrated merchant processing via Stripe. A lot of times we get questions around, are you a bank? Where do you keep our money? How do you collect the money from the customer? And how does it end up with the organizer? And so we are powered by Stripe, if you're wondering. And if you don't know what Stripe is one of probably the largest payment processor out there. Everybody pretty much works with them. So they are usually integrated in the back end, and usually many travel organizers, many DMCs, many even websites like GoDaddy, WordPress, they can end up having their own Stripe connections. But being a payment processor, we're able to negotiate better rates, and we're able to scale up way better than if you were just to have your own Stripe account. And that said, for WeTravel, we do have a global presence since 2016. We have a remote team of over 150 across the Americas, where I am. Then we have Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And then we have a few in Asia. And of course, our biggest market is definitely the US and Europe. And that said, we do have different ways we facilitate payment collections for travel organizers, for DMCs, for tour operators. One way they're able to collect money through WeTravel is by letting travelers or participants, what we call participants, pay using their credit cards or debit cards, or they can just pay using their account, the bank account. That's their ACH. In many cases, there are credit card fees involved if you pay using a card. And so I always suggest that if you can, pay using ACH. So if you're a tour operator, if you're a DMC, and you're a large travel company, and you're wondering how to make your prices competitive, because many people tell me, Lindsay, I cannot add an extra 10% on my pricing, because people can Google and see that the cruise is only costing, let's say, 2,000. So if I make my cruise pricing 2,050, I'm going to look or 2010, I'm going to look more expensive, and I'm going to lose that client because they're going to go book that trip elsewhere. So usually the best way to go about it is just to ask them to pay using an ACH or a bank account instead of paying using their card, because that will save them a lot on card fees. It could range from 2.9% for a MasterCard or a Visa to as high as 3.9% with Amex. And if you've worked in this industry, you know the challenges sometimes that come with using Amex as a payment method. That said, I'll go to the next. Let me try to remove this. How do I minimize this? Up here.
Is it a black bar? If
Yes.
you click and hold it, you can move it around your screen.
Okay, let's try this again. Or should I just say, okay, it's not moving, whatever. Okay.
We can't see that black bar, so it's
it's
only
just
on your
me?
screen. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just you.
Okay, let me go back then. So why do clients use a payment processor, for example, like WeTravel? Number one is to reduce errors in their process. Many clients that I meet, and we're not just limited to large travel companies, we're not just limited to tour operators or DMCs. We also have like smaller users, like yoga retreat organizers. Many people who have yoga businesses and they organize retreats, they want to look a little bit more professional. So they'll use a payment processor like WeTravel that gives you a clean landing page and allows you to keep all your bookings and payments in one place, and so it helps them reduce errors, because if you use spreadsheets or Excel that like most people have been using before the advent of technology, there's a possibility of having a lot of errors. In the event of a natural disaster, for example, you're more likely to use your paperwork than you are to get a new laptop and just log in and find all your information backed up. So reducing errors is big. Like any automated workflow usually helps, and especially when there's volume. So reducing errors is one. Number two, ease of use. It's easy to set up. on WeTravel, you can either start with a free account anytime, and then you can use our APIs to seamlessly transition if you want. For example, if you are using, let's say, MailChimp to organize your marketing and, save your contacts all there, we have Zapier, we have a public API, you can always, integrate, and I'll show you that later. And then you also get paid faster. Just imagine back in the day, I remember when I worked at Booking.com, for example, we were given a story of how they used to collect payments. You'd have someone on a bicycle ride their bike from one end of Amsterdam to the other to deliver a booking to a hotel and deliver a payment. And so you don't have to do that right now. Right now, if Lindsay pays for a trip with Brian, for example, Brian is going to see the payment has been initiated almost immediately. If it's ACH, it's going to be pending until it settles. If it's a card, he can actually access that money almost immediately. And then it will save you a lot of time on admin. That's why people use payment processors. So what do people do when it comes to payment collection? Number one, you can, if there are installments involved, Lindsay books a trip with Brian, for example, pays a deposit. Now, Brian has to keep calling me. Hey, Lindsay, the trip is coming up in 2 months. Could you please pay your next installment? And then people don't like to talk about money and it can get awkward. What if you don't get them on the phone? You have to keep calling and emailing, which can be annoying, and it just takes away from time you could spend creating a way better customer experience for the actual trip. So it reduces a lot of admin time. And for WeTravel, our number is by almost 60%, more than actually. And another thing too, because you're using a payment processor, because we are regulated, and because you're regulated, we naturally have to mitigate risk because we're also required. So having options to add your terms and conditions, have cancellation policies, it really helps. When Brian was talking about having a friend, let's say organize a trip, and he mentioned, okay, I don't offer legal advice here. I actually thought about the risk mitigation factor, because when you travel, there's a lot of moving parts. You're going to a new country, a new place, there's all the travel insurance, not really travel insurance, but travel risks that are involved that could not necessarily be covered by insurance. There could be security risks in some places that, the State Department is always putting up all these travel advisories. So there's a lot of risk involved. And so and as a business, you want to stay afloat. So for example, this last year, I had a big crisis to manage with what happened in Israel, the situation in Israel and in Gaza. You find many people had to cancel those trips. And so at that point, what happens if you'd already paid the vendors? Are those vendors able to refund the organizer? And if they're not able to refund the organizer, where will the organizer get money to refund the participant, right? And so using a payment processor helps cover some of these things. For example, whatever happens, whether it's a weather catastrophe, whether it's a cancellation because of just somebody got COVID or whatever happens, you can say, no matter what happens, I'll keep 50% of the deposit, and that protects you as a business. So people use payment processors like WeTravel because of provisions like that. And that said, for WeTravel, I'll skip a lot of this, but usually there's a way to build a trip, and then usually I show you what your customer sees, and then how to manage those bookings, suppliers, and run reports. So this, we probably won't have enough time to do this today. Maybe Shanae and I could talk about in future how to do this and compare with other tools that are applied by other payment processors. So typically, if you're on WeTravel, this is what you'll see. If you just go to WeTravel.com, this is what you see, whether you are a participant or a tour operator or tour organizer or DMC. Then once you go in there, you can sign in, basically create an email, and we use email as a unique identifier. So usually payments, bookings will be attached to an email address. So don't worry about it if you forget what email you used. If you ever give me your name, if you're working with us, for example, I could always look it up. And if you know your email, you can always see whatever booking you've done on WeTravel using that email. And then this is what happens when you log in. Once you log in, you can see here, it will tell you how you're logged in as. It could be logged in as Lindsay, or you could be logged in as Business and Travel. And then next, you can create a trip if you're a tour organizer. This is how the trip building process looks like for WeTravel as a payment processor. This is a back end. This is it might look a little bit complicated, quote unquote, like any new platform when you see it, but it's actually very easy. So this is how it looks like. The trip basics, basically this is a trip title, ID, some people put it, some people don't. Then the destination is very important, of course, it's a trip. Then if the trip is a one-time trip or a recurring trip, this is where you come and indicate that. And then you can add some photos, still under the trip basics. And then you can have, I know Brian was talking about private trips or public trips. So we have the same provision here. You can have your trip as private. So only people who you send the invite to can book. For example, if Lindsay is having her honeymoon in Italy and I only want my family and friends to join, for example, or a destination wedding, I can only send this link to friends and family or people on my guest list. If it's public, anybody can just go to Business and Travel as a website and just see, okay, they have 10 trips, one to Morocco. Okay, I can book from anywhere in the world. It's not just close to a specific group of travelers. So that's how it looks like. About this trip, that's self-explanatory. Basically, you can add whatever you want to add there, what's included, what's not. And then itinerary, we have it's a day-by-day itinerary. It's not as detailed when it comes to hourly per day, but you can have a general itinerary just to give your potential travelers a rough idea of what to expect if they book a trip with you. And then some people have different pricing for trips or one price for all participants. So some people have different packages. For example, if it's a cruise, some people, if you have like a balcony and you have like an ocean view, not the hallway view, whatever categorizations they have, they might have different pricing. If you are in a hotel and you have, let's say, the suite, you might have a different price from if you have a double or a full room. And so this is where you come and make that distinction, and then you're able to add the pricing and you're able to indicate how many you have in that inventory. And of course, all that good stuff you want. Are you collecting a deposit? If you don't indicate that you're collecting a deposit, usually you'd be required to put down the full amount. So this is typically how payment processors have you set up your account. And then this is, I created this slide when Shanae first told me about this workshop, but right now you can actually add up to 18 payments. So there are some of the organizers I manage, they transact, only $100,000 through WeTravel a year, but some do 5 million plus a year through us. Of course, we don't keep the whole money, we just keep a small percentage, if you're wondering. And so one cool thing about a payment processor like WeTravel is that you can set up a few installment payments so that somebody, let's say Shanae is organizing a trip to Morocco and it's being priced at 10,000. Most people don't have 10,000 just lying around, but they really want to go to Morocco. And like Brian was mentioning, it's just good to have an 18-month leadway, to be able to plan, anticipate anything, lock down the pricing. And so if you did that and you need serious people to show commitment, you can say, you know what, this is going to cost $10,000, but I'm going to have people put down a 10% deposit. So if you put down a 10% deposit, which would be like $1,000, now you're a serious traveler. Then now we can set a payment plan for you. And the cool part about WeTravel is that we send automatic reminders before the next installment is due. So this eliminates that part where you have to keep calling and saying, hey, Lindsay, I know you paid $1,000 to reserve your spot, but the next payment is due. So instead of that, you don't have to do any of that. It will send them automatic reminders whenever their payment is due. And they have and the organizer also has an option to enable auto billing if they're on the Pro plan. Basically, if they can save their preferred method of payment under their account. And so they'll be given an alert. Your payment is coming up maybe on March 6th. We're going to take out $687.50, like in this example. And so you can allow partial payments as well. Lindsay gets paid on a Friday, but she's a spendthrift. She likes to go to Starbucks, or she just saw a new sale going on at Bath and Body Works, but she's like, I really want to go on this trip and my payment is due next week, but I just got paid this week. What can I do? I can just go in there. I may not have the full 687 at hand, but I know I have like some 350 at hand. I can go in and make a partial payment until I meet the full installment amount that's due. So you don't have to keep that money and use it or misuse it for other things. And then you can enable auto billing, like I said. And then another thing that you might find interesting now with pricing, this is a little bit more elaborate. I don't think this workshop needs us to go into detail, but the other cool part I need you to note that I may have mentioned earlier is who pays the processing fees. And when I talk about the processing fees, I'm talking about both the card fees and the processing fees, because WeTravel as a payment processor, we also have to make money, right? And we are very competitive, of course, compared to what's out there. But at the same time, we want to make sure the business stays afloat. So it's important for anybody using a payment processor to be aware of what fees do you pay to the payment processor itself, and what fees would you pay according to the payment method that your participant chooses. And you can, on WeTravel, you can assign those fees either to the participant or or you can absorb them as an organizer. And so this can really make a difference if, let's say, you have a trip that's very expensive, like the one I just described of $10,000, for example. And then you can add all these other things, travel insurance, not really important right now. And then you may have noticed that people are talking more and more about sustainable travel. People are more and more aware of their carbon offset or carbon footprint. When they travel, people think, flying is very expensive for the planet. So WeTravel gives you an opportunity to offset your carbon footprint by donating to Sustainable Travel International, which is our partner at the moment, and that could change, or we could add more. And so you pay nothing, and your client does not even have to opt in, but you just give them an option to donate 1% of their total trip towards offsetting whatever carbon footprint they will generate as a result of taking part in that trip. And so that is totally optional. And if you go to Sustainable Travel International, they even allow you to calculate exactly what your carbon footprint should be from a specific trip. So of course, they base it off how far you traveled, your method of traveling, how long you're staying in a place, and that kind of stuff. And then you can allow people to accept contributions. So it's like we always joke and say it's a GoFundMe for travel. So Lindsay wants to go or little Johnny wants to go to Yosemite, and little Johnny does not make much money during the summer from the lemonade stand, but they still want to go to Yosemite as part of their school trip. But grandma knows that little Johnny's birthday is coming up. So grandma you can send the link to grandma. Grandma can chip in and, to Johnny's trip. Like let's say it's going to cost $2,000 a student. Grandma can go and say, you know what, for Johnny's birthday, I'm going to put in 100. And then Uncle Ed might decide to add another 50. Lindsay, who's a well-wisher from school, likes Johnny because he participates in Little League. I can go in and put in another 100. So you chip in and you contribute towards a trip. So this can work for schools, for students, for honeymoons, birthdays, so it helps. And then this is basically how your trip would look like after you set it up in the back end. So it's much more cleaner on the front end. So the client or your traveler or your participant does not know all the crazy stuff you have to do in the back end. And then that said, let's go here. And then you can give a discount code. Some people do early bird. So if you want to ramp up bookings, you can say, you know what, the first 10 people to book, they're going to get 10% off or $50 off. It's up to you. So you can add as many discount codes as you want, and you get a chance to actually also determine how many times that discount code is used. And then if you have multiple departure dates, this is how it would look like. If you remember when we were creating a trip, it would ask you, is it a one-time trip or is it a recurring trip? This is how it would look like. And then you can select the departure dates the way you want it. This is how it looks. And then you publish your trip. Then you get a link. So basically, that's the link you send out to whoever you want to book. If it's a private trip, you only send it to your mailing list. If it's a private trip, yes, you send it to your mailing list. If it's a public trip, anybody who goes to your website can have it embedded, which I'll show you shortly. Then you can go and book now. When you click book now, it will just take them to a page like this where they can book. This is how it looks on the front end. Yep, that's how it looks. And then as a trip organizer, you're able to manage your trip. Internally, you can go back and edit exactly what I showed you earlier what you built in. You can go back in and always edit it. When Lindsay and the rest start booking, and like say Robert Rogers books as well, you can go in and basically check who has paid, what's due. So you can see this is how it looks like. So it will tell you if they've paid the deposit, if there's an amount that's overdue. And if it just says due, it means the installment due date is not yet there. So you don't have to worry. And then it tells you how much you're expecting on the entire trip. It tells you how much has been paid so far. And if it might show you what amount is pending. So pending amount usually is what has been paid using a bank transfer. So basically with bank transfers, as you know, it might take a day or two for the amount to settle, but you'll know it's coming. And so then payment dashboards, every payment processor most likely has a payment dashboard. It will tell you what's the total that has been collected and what's available. If you notice a discrepancy, it's because of the fees I talked about. So if you are absorbing all the fees for, let's say, the cards and the processing fees, you'll definitely see a discrepancy depending on what you're absorbing. If you're not absorbing any of those fees, then whatever you've collected, you might see that is way closer to what is available. FYI. And then all this stuff, we don't need to go over that right now. And then if you want to pay your suppliers directly on WeTravel, you can do that. I don't know if all the other payment processors do. To avoid the whole taking money from your WeTravel account, sending it to your Bank of America, Chase, or Wells Fargo, or whatever, you can just have them, invite them as a supplier on WeTravel. They go through our KYC verification to avoid the whole, money laundering process, whatever. And then you can just send them the money. And then app integrations, like I mentioned, we have a partnership with Zapier. So this is where you'd kind of come in, you can use your MailChimp, you can use a scheduler. This is whatever app you're using. QuickBooks is a very popular app that people like to integrate to their WeTravel. So for tax purposes or for accounting purposes, the bookkeeping, generally, people try to integrate their WeTravel account to their Zapier. And then accountant team members. So sometimes you find, let's say Brian is the main admin on the account, is the business owner, but he has people helping him, like tour operators. So let's say Lindsay, so Brian owns a business, they do school trips to Yosemite, but there's a tour leader, there's a teacher in that class who's going to help coordinate everything with the parents and the students. So you can add that teacher as a team member. And whenever the trip is over, you can just go in and remove them. You can always add your insurance link. And so this is where the team member would show up anyway. And then you can always give them permissions depending on what you want them to be, able to see. Anyway, that said, how to reach most payment processor, you can always have a chat for most of them. You can always email them. Many of them have like an account manager like me, but account managers only manage specific accounts. We cannot manage all accounts, we only manage like the high grossing ones. And then I'll send Shanae some of the links to the webinars, the courses, and all that good stuff. And on that note, as I conclude, I wanted to show you just some of the things that we have as resources for our organizers. Because we get to process payments, we get to see a lot of trends in the industry, we do. And so because of that, we're able to offer advice based off of facts, right? And so we're able to tell you, the way Brian was saying, maybe it's good to organize your trip 18 months in advance. In advance, most people pay using this payment method. Most people like to pay a deposit or not. If you want to sell a trip, let's say to Jamaica, it's seasonal. It's a seasonal market, for example. You're most likely to get it fully sold out if you organize this trip between this dates and this date. So there's a lot of things that we're able to see as a result of having collected payments and having the back-end insight to seeing the patterns after collecting those payments. And then the biggest announcement we have this year, we have an inventory management feature, at least for WeTravel, that we just introduced. That I don't need to go into right now, but I can send Shanae the resources, then maybe she could share with the rest of the participants in this. And then last thing I wanted to show you, as part of today, we have a travel, let me just stop here, and then we have a travel trends report, and I'd like actually for Brian to go over it and tell me what you think. When you get a chance, did everything disappear on my screen? Maybe yes, but we do have a travel trends that it's a summary of everything we observed and all the data we collected from 2023. And so maybe I can just send that out later so I don't take all the time. We can give a couple seconds for questions, but that's summary, yeah. Sorry, I had to go real quick.
No, that was good. And it was so complimentary to what Brian was saying, because he talked about the process of planning the trip, but then that back end of how do you put it on your website? How do you collect those payments? How do you avoid a lot of the admin frustrations behind the whole payment, behind payment processing and just organizing in general? So this was very complimentary, and I thank both of you for joining us today to really share your knowledge and how people can effectively plan group trips. Jasmine says, thank you, Lindsay. It was good to see how the platform works on the back end. Yeah, that back end part was really helpful.
You're welcome.
Yes, and then we don't have any questions. I think both of you gave very detailed information about group travel, planning group trips. If you could both send me your resources, I will share them in the replay. I think somebody just, Lindsay. Okay, Lindsay, I think you just dropped the report. Is this
Yes, the trends report
here
for 2023 that I would love all of you to give me feedback on. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so Lindsay dropped the trends report, and then I will share that. And then if both of you have resources that you want me to share in the replay, then I'll be happy to share that as well. But thank you both so much for joining me today. I'm so grateful for all of the knowledge that you've shared. Brian also dropped his free resource in the chat as well. So make sure you click on those links before we close out the workshop. And that is all for today. Thank you so much. And until next time, bye.
Thank you, Shanae, for putting this together.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.
You're welcome. Bye.